Great. Welcome. This is all brand new technology to me. My first NCLA event and the first one online. I want to welcome my guest, Courttia Newland, who's someone I've been really excited to sit down with and chat to. So when I was asked to organize an event, he was one of the first people I thought about. So this is for us really going to be a friendly chat between screenwriters. We love the craft, and we've known each other, but it was like really learning about Courttia's work. I was swept away by your episode of Small Axe, particularly Lovers Rock, but also Red, White, and Blue as well. Both superb pieces of television, but incredibly cinematic. So welcome. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you. I'm really excited. To have a chat. Thank you. Hello, everyone. Thanks for coming.
It is strange not being able to see people. I mean, if we were in a lecture hall, we would be able to make eye contact and get a sense. So we're just imagining some faces.
Yeah, I'm still getting used to it, but yeah, it's very different.
Yeah. So Lem Cisse said of you, if you want to know about the story of Britain, it's really important to read Newland. And there's a reason for the Oscar-winning McQueen working with you, which I think is such a lovely tribute to you. I think that's, as a novelist and playwright and now a screenwriter, it's clear that your work is tapping into what's happening in contemporary British culture, not just in diverse Black British culture, but in what's happening in the state of the nation. But a little biography about you. I mean, I guess for audiences at home, your debut novel you published at the age of 23, The Scholar, A West Side Story, which was a much praised portrayal of teenage life in the inner city. We'd love to hear about your transition from being a prose writer to screenwriting, which we'll get to. But you've written 7 more books and 8 plays and garnered awards for your work, so that's incredibly inspiring. Everything from detective fiction to astral projection, science fiction with your latest novel that's come out, a work of speculative fiction, A River Called Time, which has just been published this year by Canongate. And another one that's in the pipeworks, Cosmogramma. Is that right?
Cosmogramma is coming out later this year, probably I think October. It's coming out over here, in November in the US. We just sent it to the copy editor today. The proofers today. So the proof copies will be coming soon. So it's on the way now. Yeah.
Congratulations. So do you want to tell us a little bit about your journey to becoming a writer, the biography? That's sort of part of how we all got to get into this crazy game in the first place.
Well, it's a really convoluted story. I'll try and cut it down a bit. But basically, I was a drum and bass white label producer, and I'd written a little bit over the years. Sorry, before that, I'd been an MC. I've been a rapper, but I moved into doing like drum and bass music production, and I put out a white label, and it'd actually done incredibly well. And we'd sold it in independent record shops up and down the country, drove around in a van and collected our money and pooled our money together, and we bought some music equipment, and then we tried to carry on, but we needed more equipment, and we didn't have a release. We didn't have as much money as we'd had before. So I had the bright idea. And I said this to my friends. I said, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'll write a book, yeah? And then I will sell that book to a publishing company, and then I will sell the film rights, and we'll make a film out of this. And then I will go back to making music, and I'll never write another book again. That was the plan, no word of a lie. So I set about trying to write this book. And about 3 months into writing the book, I was like, you know what, actually, that's just to myself. I don't want to do music anymore. Actually, this is it. I've actually discovered the thing that I'm meant to do. And I've been running away from it my whole life. And now I realize.
Are you one of those annoying people who actually likes writing?
I love writing, yeah.
Man, I've never met anyone like that before.
Yeah, I do love writing. And I literally have been writing since I was about 8 years old. properly, like writing, like trying to write novels, you know. And my English teacher told me when I was 11, I'd given her what I'd worked on, and it's a really terrible story actually. I'd given it to her at 11, and she said to me, "You're going to be a novelist when you get older." And I got really angry with her. Like I got really, like I lost it, because at that stage I wanted to be an MC, I wanted to be a rapper, and you can't tell a kid at 11 who wants to be a rapper that he's going to be a novelist. It's like that, especially not in those times, the 80s. So it was the worst thing. So my whole teenage years, I'd run away from the idea of becoming a novelist, even though I'd written short stories. And then I was like, okay, I'm going to give it a go. I said it was something I'll do in my 50s. You know what older people do. Old people do those novels. So I tried to write this novel, The Scholar, and it just came out really well. I really enjoyed myself. I had a lot of fun.
Right. And so, I mean, which was incredible at the age of, 23, but what were your early influences in terms of literature and text that you were consuming, whether that was films or actually, prose?
Yeah, it was everything, a bit of everything. I've never really been like someone who confines myself to genre. So one minute I'd be reading like like my mum had Rushdie on the shelves. I'd be reading Rushdie, and then the next minute I'd be reading Harlem Renaissance novels. I'd be reading Baldwin, reading a lot of African American novels, a lot of Caribbean novels, because those were primarily where our Black centered stories were coming from. There wasn't much but in the way of Black British stories. I do remember reading The Unbelonging. I read that when I was quite young. I was reading a lot of books I shouldn't have been reading. I was reading a lot of adult fiction as a kid. I read all of Stephen King. I loved like horror and like sci-fi. Yeah, I read a lot of him. And then, I remember when I was doing The Scholar, I was about to do The Scholar, I saw Lahane. And that was the real tipping point for me, seeing Lahane, because it wasn't American, because it was French, and I grew up like Shepherd's Bush, Ladbroke Grove, West London and stuff, and so there's a huge Moroccan community in Ladbroke Grove. And then seeing like the kind of the way that French culture had, you had the black guy, you had the Arab guy, and you had the white guy. I recognized that was like, okay, that's like my end. So then that really, it was very, very different to watching the American stuff that I've been watching up until that time.
And so perhaps you were considering what that meant in a British context when you were looking around at the your own experience, and how important was it to you to think about that, the use of identity and your practice into your creative work. You have very deep themes, your stories are rich and really multi-layered pieces, but did you feel like there was a need to confront like your own experience as a Black British man, or was that just incidental and you wrote about what you knew? I'm just wondering about
no, it was completely about representing Black Britain, like 100%. I remember even like when I used to go to school on Wood Lane or Duquesne Road, that's where my school was, Burnt Danes School, and we would walk from Burnt Danes to White City Estate to go to the swimming pool. There used to be White City swimming pool in the middle of the estate, and all the way there, me and my friends would be talking about all the stories that we had in the UK as opposed to being in the States. And that's when you're talking about 12, 13 years old. Me and my friends would talk about that and saying, but we've got all this stuff that would be amazing if this happened, that happened. But it was all based on our lives. And even when I wrote the stories, my teenage years of telling short stories, or writing short stories, was all about trying to articulate Black British culture as well. So I'd write a story about a guy in Shepherd's Bush, and write a story about a guy in Ladbroke Grove, a story about a guy in Harlesden. I do it all in my like school, workbooks, but they were all connected by family. They were all cousins basically, and I was telling the story of one family, but they lived in different parts of London, and how it was different, and how they had different stories and different things happen. And
creating a universe, like almost like a soap opera of characters that you found their multiple narratives, I suppose.
Definitely, but steeped in Black British culture. Really, really steeped in that. And I was very keen on representing to ourselves and the rest of the world what was really happening, what was really going on.
I mean, we're similar ages, so I don't want to say how old you are, but I grew up with like in the States with the Huxley family, and it was there was nothing on television that represented diverse culture. No. And did you feel like you needed to fill in those spaces or breathe life into those? world.
Yeah.
And how did you feel about that sort of, almost like lack of real examples that go before us, like there weren't the cons, there weren't the, all these different shows, and, Lenny Henry was there, but I imagine, again, I didn't grow up in Britain. So what did you have to cling on to?
Very little. So we had Lenny, yes, of course, and his Crucial Radio. I can't remember the name of the character there. It slipped my mind, but he had Delbert Wilkins was the character, and he had a show that was all about a pirate radio station DJ, and that was really inspiring because it was close, There was Desmond's at the time, which was, again, it was hugely inspiring and hugely influential, but I always felt like it was close, but not quite what I wanted to say. There was still a gap, to talk about a strata of society that still wasn't strictly being represented. It's because I was younger, I was a different generation. You had No Problem back in the 80s, which was really big. Before that you had Empire Road, of course, that Lenny Henry was in. So there was, every now and then there'd be like one show that was really big,
Did you feel like it was mediated through a white lens or white storytelling structure? Did you feel the authenticity was there, or did you find that there was a frustration about the kind of way that it depicted, or what?
At the time I was frustrated. Now I see that frustration was misplaced. I was frustrated because I felt that it was generationally not quite accurate, because it wasn't being told by people who were that generation. So when they were talking about our age group, it would be a little bit wrong, I felt. But I also, class-wise, it was usually most of the time trying to be middle class aspirational, apart from something like No Problem, which I felt was really like, it felt really grounded and really like, okay, this is what I see around me. And there was also The Real McCoy as well, which was really, really, that felt true and that felt authentic. But there wasn't very much representation of my generation as well. So I felt that no one really knew who we were. No one really knew, no one really understood us, basically. Like, we talked a weird slang. We'd say things like, "You get me," and stuff. And all that, like, the elders would be looking at us like, why are you guys talking like that? You talk funny, man. And it was new, it was fresh. No one had ever spoken like that before. So I wanted to capture that. That's what I was really interested in.
I have a question from the audience that's come through from Sarah Chris, who said, "I'd love to hear both people's thoughts on the link between music, prose, script, and screenwriting. Are there themes meant to be expressed through certain medium?" And actually, my next question was also about theme, about where you come to your kind of the material that you want to confront in your work. I mean, astral projection, and I really had to dig to find out how you came to that topic. And of course, there's a biographical element. So if you could tell us a little bit about your more recent novel, but also thematically, do you push things into different forms, or does it happen organically for you?
No, it's totally organic, and everything's linked. It's just like what I choose to push to the forefront and what I choose to keep behind. So for example, that novel is set in a world, it's a sci-fi novel, speculative fiction novel set in a world where slavery and colonization never happened. And because that never happened, African cosmology is the dominant religion. And because African cosmology is the dominant religion, chakras, ancestor worship, meditation, all of these things that are kind of seen as niche right now and alternative are not alternative. They're just the mainstream. Everyone does them. And everything, all forms of African spirituality, or any spirituality actually, are kind of to be respected. So, and I came at that just because, at one point in my life, I felt like I had an out-of-body experience. And when I felt like I had this out-of-body experience, I thought to myself, number one, wow, that was really scary. I wonder if that was an out-of-body experience, because I was looking down on my own body on the bed, I think. And number two was that, wow, no one's really written about that. That's a great thing to write about. So that set me off. And then I always remember, like, a while when I'd really made the concrete decision to write that novel. I was in my hostel room. I was living in a hostel in Ladbroke Grove, and I woke up in the middle of the night, and I'd left the TV on to MTV Base, and it was playing the Pyramid song, Radiohead.
Okay.
And literally the lyrics of the Pyramid song Radiohead are the exact what happens in my novel. And
Right.
that's what I was trying to write. And it was just there. And it was this big, I had this big TV and the video was playing. It was completely dark in my room. And I was just like, this is it. This is like, so yeah, for me, music and the novel is completely entwined. It wasn't overt in that novel in the sense that I was always talking about music in the novel, but I have got a playlist about like
Mhm.
8, 9 hours long that I wrote to, and I would listen to this playlist all the time when I was writing it. And I have a
Yeah.
playlist for every novel that I've written. Yeah,
I've got that in common with you. Every script has a
yeah,
playlist on
yeah,
Spotify before
yeah,
it's
yeah,
even finished. So
yeah,
it's
exactly.
so much about tapping into the rhythm
Yeah.
of the story, right?
Yeah, it's the vibe and the mood and what you're trying to create and getting into that zone. And I really needed that. With The Scholar, I was listening to loads of like drum and bass. You know what I mean? That drum and bass, jungle, because that was the soundtrack of that particular novel. And then obviously with things like Lovers Rock, it's like more overt. So the music is there and placed in the screenplay. But I had a list as well. I had a playlist as that, Spotify for that as well. Yeah. So.
You've been described as a literary authority on beautifully expressing the Black British experience and
Oh,
expanding the
have I?
purpose and potential of the
Really?
European novel form.
Oh, who said
Which,
that? I've
I
never
don't
heard
know,
that before.
somebody on the internet.
Okay, okay,
I
good.
think it's a dude who actually works in my department. No,
Oh,
it's
really?
James
Okay.
Proctor, I believe.
Okay,
But
wow.
and tell me about this coined phrase Afrofuturism, and you said you feel ambivalent about this.
Yeah.
And then there's another question that's come through, which kind of comes into this question: is there a distinction between Black British culture and Black London culture for you? And do you know if the stories also speak to experiences? If the stories speak to the experiences beyond the capital, and that's from Max
Okay.
Relshard.
That's a massive
Sorry for
question.
messing up your name, Max.
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
that's a great question. So I
That's a great
think
question, yeah.
Afrofuturism, London, in terms of the Black experience, and also, do you feel any responsibility for that, or are you just like that's you?
So let me try and get through those. Please hold those in your head because I'll forget a couple of them. Afrofuturism is generally a term that's used to it's associated with African American science fiction, speculative fiction. The whole gamut, horror, whatever. Like steampunk, anything that comes out of the African American experience that is to do with science fiction as a whole is termed Afrofuturism. And so it was coined by an academic called Mark Deary in the late 90s, and he was a white academic. Some people have some ambivalence with that, but like I think that for me it really tends to speak of the American experience, and it has a set of there's these things that are done stylistically and stuff which I am not doing in River or in Cosmogramma, so that's why I'm quite ambivalent about the term Afrofuturism. I don't mind it came from Mark Deary, but I think his essay on it, Black to the Future, is brilliant, and it was interviews with prominent people like Samuel Delaney, who worked in this field. I think African futurism actually suits me a lot better and feels a lot more comfortable because it even though Afrofuturism does speak to the whole diaspora, I think African futurism is really overt about those intentions, and says, okay, it's about everybody, it's about all of us. It's not solely one section of the globe that we're talking about. It's more all-encompassing. I believe that's what I'm doing. So yeah, I'm happy with that. What was the second question?
Well, I guess it's almost like saying, is there a specificity to your experience of, the Black experience? Is it London based? Is it British based? Is it,
Yeah.
you talk about this African futurism and the
Yeah.
Afrofuturism, which is kind of a way of saying that there's many different experiences, different lenses in which you could apply how your work is relevant. And like, actually, I think that people want to find comfortable niches. But like for you, I guess the question to ask is what's important and what you might have done in your work previously, and more potentially what you're doing with the new work, and how you want to be defined as a writer of obviously from a diverse multi identities that we all hold,
Of course,
British, Black British,
Yeah, Caribbean, yeah.
Working class communities,
Working
etc.
class,
Class
yeah,
works
exactly.
into that, which I know you've talked about.
Yeah, definitely. I'm really keen on class. I mean, I think there is a specificity to being a Black Londoner. Definitely, when you go to Manchester, it's not quite the same. When you go to Newcastle, it's not quite the same. You know, I had a cousin that lived in Newcastle, so I used to travel up when I was 13 years old, and I was very much like, "Whoa, this is different, man." You know what I mean? So, yeah, it's different, definitely. But there's also crossovers. You know, that's what I really love. You know, like when I'm in Leeds or something, I'm like, okay, so how do things work here? What's your slang? What do you say for this? And there's always an exchange. And even within London,
Mhm.
it's very specific to regions and areas, you know. So like the way that we talk in East London, the way that we talk in West London is not the same, you know. And I remember having conversations like that with people from East London. You call this, and we call this that, and we had our own separate slangs for things. So and then within the areas within West London as well, we've got your own personal slang. So yeah. I mean,
Sometimes you can feel like you're further away from the people that are closer to you, and
yes,
you go somewhere else, and maybe you feel like you go to LA and feel like this
yeah,
is home. Like I
yeah,
always
yeah,
feel
yeah.
like it's so different than the experience growing up, but
Mm,
it's a very diverse and multicultural place. So
yeah, yeah,
it has a strange way of feeling
yeah.
like you belong. I mean, it's not
Yeah.
always your neighbor that, you know.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I have an affinity with New York in that way. You know, when I go to New York, I feel like I've just like stepped in another part of London. And I know New Yorkers hate Londoners saying that, but it's actually true. And yeah, there's things that are vastly different, completely different. But there are lots of things that are the same. And I think that they're also, you know, I've just written about this. I've just done a PhD. I'm just submitting my PhD thesis. So I'm doing my Viva in
Congratulations.
September, you know.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, but basically I've been talking about this in a literary sense, you know, the crossover and the dialogue that we've been having. That a lot of people haven't understood how that works, and they've generally tried to think of it as being one-way cultural imperialism that just comes from the United States and just to us. But there's been a back and forth going on throughout the diaspora for obviously centuries, and you can really track it and see it. And I'm talking about that in a literary sense, you know, our shared language, you know, in that thesis.
Yeah, I mean, definitely that call and response between,
Hmm.
you know, Black British culture, Black American culture, and also obviously with its, you know, white counterparts too.
Yeah,
Is
yeah, of
actually
course.
there is so much, you know, borrowing, influencing, sort of
Mm,
you know, enriching of each
definitely.
other. And I read some of that sort of saying that you know, your kind of your work, it owes a lot to Black American,
Mm,
you know, contemporary crime, urban stories.
mhm.
But I actually looked at your work and thought, no, not really. It's
Yeah,
about contemporary experiences, and sometimes it's very similar, you know,
yeah,
tent poles that hold those experiences up. But
well,
you
exactly.
know, to me, and we can talk about that because we did
Yeah,
email about that.
you've
I
emailed
mean,
about it. Yeah, you're talking about the Kwame Dawes
yeah.
quote, right? I mean, yeah. Kwame Dawes has said some things that, like, have you got the quote there, just so that people like know exactly what was said? Because I hate paraphrasing. Actually,
Yeah,
I
I
prefer.
can drag it out the email,
Yeah,
but
if you,
I mean,
yeah. I
I
mean,
didn't even feel like at the end when I asked you about it and how you felt, because it was something interesting in its controversy, and that the
yeah,
accusation of sort of being
yeah,
overly influenced by American culture.
yeah,
But that's enough. I mean, he made his point, and I think it's actually quite a thin point, to be honest,
yeah. Well, that's what I was
because
gonna say.
it's almost like saying that American cultural imperialism is the only thing that we can find important or dear.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
you know, you're writing about stuff that's quite clearly British, quite
yeah,
clearly from the, you know, Afro-Caribbean experience in London.
yeah.
Why should anything that's urban belong to America?
Because I think because it's I mean I think just to speak on that, I mean I think it's obvious how illogical that is, as you're saying, you know, when you look back on it now. I think when it was said, which would have been about maybe between 98 and 99, and this is with respect to Kwame Dawes, you know what I mean? I do respect him as an academic and a poet, you know, no disrespect whatsoever intended, but just like that argument I just don't agree with at all. You know, and I said so at the time. We literally we had it out in a series of emails like about that what he'd said, you know, yeah, like at the time. But I think at that point in time in 97, 98, people had no understanding of what Black British culture actually was. They didn't. Like you knew if you were there, and even for people who were here in London, you know, people, not everybody knew this was going on. I could have a phone conversation to my friends in front of my mum and talk completely in slang, and she had no idea what I was talking about. You know, like I could do that because I just spoke heavily in our patois, you know, which is a very London patois, but mixed up with like Caribbean. Of course, the Caribbean stuff she understood. It was the British stuff there. She was just like, what? We had different words for everything, you know. So no one knew that was happening. It was quite under the radar. And when I wrote my book, I think I'm pretty sure I was the first person who'd said that stuff.
Yeah.
And so, on the basis of like what the Black British literary novel should be doing, some people took offense at that. On the basis of class-wise as well, like, why are you wearing our dirty linen in public? Why are you saying all this stuff? Why are you trying to be like these guys from America because America is so culturally dominant at the time? You know, there was a sense of that, like, you know, this can't be happening in Britain. There's no way this is happening in Britain. I saw another writer in America say, if there was a hip hop scene in the UK, I would have heard about it, this American guy said. And this is a conference, a Black Writers Conference. And this was at the height of grime in the UK, but it hadn't come over, you know. So all the young students, they knew, they made a lot of noise. They were like, that's not true. But the people working in the academy, or you know, who were the tastemakers in a sense, the purveyors, they didn't know. And that's what happened with that. And I feel like time has proven that incorrect, basically. Now when you look, you know, you've got the
margin has shifted, hasn't it? And what was a lived experience and what you experienced through being in that now has somehow become, I suppose, popularized. It's a terrible way of putting it, but in some ways now it has become part of a conversation we have about Britishness, when actually Stormzy is probably one of the most recognizable characters outside of the UK in terms of young people in America. I've been talking to some commissioners about that exact point, which is who is British, who translates to America. And that's the name they chose. And that's like, wow, that happened in my lifetime. And I'm kind of like...
But when I wrote The Scholar in 1997, I was pushing for that. I was saying, let's have a time when that happens. And there's even a character in my novel who says to someone, stop talking American. Why don't you use our slang? You talk the way that we talk. So the fact that was said is kind of bizarre to me, because it's even in my novel where I'm wrestling with this notion of American culture and imperialism. But I have to big up, there was an MC called Sway. And Sway was around. He was a UK rapper. He wasn't grime. And he was around, I can't remember when I saw him. I saw him in Finsbury Park, maybe early 2000s. And I went to this park jam in Finsbury Park, and he was on the mic and he was doing his songs, and everyone in the audience was saying his lyrics. And I remember being like, yes, now we've got to that point in time. And yeah, he predates Stormzy by at least a decade or two. Yeah.
Well, he wouldn't be here without those kind of steps along the way, right? And we forget the history of that and the story of that. And I have to admit, I'm not sure I know that story of that, but I think it would be an amazing story to tell. And in the same way that the story of hip hop in America seems to now have countless documentaries telling.
Or not even now. Then I think even back then, and that's something that was part of my frustrations as a young man walking to White City swimming pool and talking with my friends, was like, they had what I called these cultural advertisements. They had these big, at Beat Street, you had breakdance, you had, you know, I can't remember the name of the graffiti documentary, but I remember we all loved it. You had these things which were like advertisements for the culture, which went global. I always said we never had a film. We never had a film about the jungle scene. We never had a film about the UK garage scene. We never had a film about the hardcore scene before that. And we never had a film. Scar.
Like, where was that story told?
Where was that story told? Lovers Rock, you know what I mean? Like, so even, you could say Sway in the 2000s, but then going back to Lovers Rock and stuff, and this is a little bit later than Lovers Rock, but you talk about Saxon, Tipper Irie, Smiley Culture. Those guys predated virtually everybody because they were doing it. Like, if you guys, I don't know if anyone in the audience knows Smiley Culture. apart from, if you might have heard of him, he was a guy who got killed allegedly by police brutality. We don't know what happened, you know. It's a really horrible story. But in the 80s, the early 80s, he was a top 10 selling reggae artist. He was on top of the pops with a song called Police Officer, funnily enough. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Wow.
And
that sounds like a film right there, or a TV series.
Right. And his other song was Cockney Translator. And he was talking about the fact that Black British people at the time would speak in patois, Jamaican patois, but also could switch to Cockney. And he was like saying that this is what you would say in Cockney and this is what you'd say in Jamaican patois. And so, yeah, it's the same. And he was an MC, you know, back in those days. Yeah.
Courttia, this is all going so quickly because we're almost halfway through. And I really want to get to your, you know, your transition to being a screenwriter, because I know that, you know, it's so different and challenging moving form sometimes. And, you know, screenwriting is not something that we immediately kind of have access to. You know, scripts aren't always lying around, and certainly now with the internet, a lot more accessible. But how did you come around to it? Was it through the playwriting? Was it something you'd always wanted to do? But how did you come to the screenwriting aspect?
Yeah, I'd always done it, you know. So when I wrote The Scholar, I wrote some parts of The Scholar as screenplays, and I was always planning to write a screenplay. I immediately after I wrote The Scholar, I wrote the screenplay for The Scholar, and I just always wanted to do film. Like I said, I'd seen Lehane. I talked to my friends about it when I was a teenager. I was like, I want to do film. It was one of those things, and I was meant to. That's part of the plan, right? I do the book, and then I do the film. So I worked really hard at that. But yeah, you know, I had the I won't bore you guys with the tussle with the industry that I had, but you know, I had deals. I lost deals.
A little bit, because we do need to know how. I think the screenwriters, you know, in this want to know that sort of how did you crack going from a prose writer to getting accepted in the industry? Because somehow, you know, you can write a novel with a pen and paper, but to make a screenplay, you need people to believe in you and to almost like financially invest in your vision, which is about trust. And as we know in this industry, trust is not given out lightly.
No, it's very hard to come by. It took me a long time, put it this way. And like I said, I started off, it started great. You know, as soon as I signed the deal for The Scholar, I got a deal to do a TV version of The Scholar, and I worked on that, but that didn't work out. And then I did a couple of other things, and I was talking to Channel 4 about doing a version of my second novel. And there was regular, like, deals came and deals went. It never quite worked.
The development hell, we call it, yeah?
It was development hell. And I did a couple other things where I actually got to write screenplays, but those never got greenlit. But all the time I was just like, you know, I'm just going to keep writing. I'm going to keep writing. And then at one point in time where I kind of said I was going to keep writing, but I'm going to turn back to prose and I was keep writing books. But when it got difficult for me to write books in the same way that it was difficult to write screenplays, people were not really too excited about my ideas. And one of those ideas was A River Called Time 20 years ago. I decided, okay, I'm really going to jump into writing screenplays now, and I'm going to take it really seriously. And I went back to it, and I just had to really try and learn the craft. And I just wrote and watched films and you know, I taught a bit, you know, and I learned a lot from teaching and just practice. And what I was saying to myself was, I need to be ready. Like, I know that the industry is not really opening its doors to me, but there's going to be a door one day, and I need to be prepared. I need to have the scripts ready so that when someone wants to see something, I've got it. And that person happens to be Steve McQueen.
You know, that's the whole thing, is you had that tenacity and that sense that, you know, you weren't dissuaded from all those development opportunities that didn't happen, and sort of going from, you know, what can feel very, very painful, especially when you're developing projects that you put your heart and soul into. You dangled the carrot of the possibility of getting made, and things fall at the hurdle. Such a story of the industry, right?
Yeah, I mean, my last book, I remember I sold an option on it, and I had the option renewed 1 week, and then it got dropped the week after. And I was just like, what? How can that be? So yeah, it's difficult, you know, but You know, I just feel like the most important thing is doing the work. You know, that, like, I do think that if you can keep doing that, then you should be okay. You know, I wouldn't like to go out on a limb and say you definitely will be okay, but I think that was my attitude then. Was just like I just got to keep going.
Tell me a little bit about I really love finding out about people's writing practice, like just the very kind of the discipline of it. What's your discipline for writing? Because obviously you're prolific. Is it an early morning thing? Do you have notebooks, how do you work?
Yeah, I won't work. No, not like strictly, but I have got notebooks. I've got my notebook here. So, was it there?
Any of my students who's listening now,
oh god, I can't find it.
I told you. I told you
so,
that this is exactly
my notebook. So I got my notebooks. I got my notes on my phone that I use sometimes. I was just like plotting out something on my phone. I just use whatever comes to hand, really. I don't mind what it is. And I get up, in the morning. I take my kids to school. Back by 9 o'clock. Then I'm at front of the desk from 9 o'clock to about like 12 o'clock. Lately, it's been 11 o'clock because I need to exercise. So but it's been 9 to 11. I exercise for a bit. Then I have a smoothie at 12, and then I go back for about another hour or so in the afternoon, or more if I'm not doing loads of meetings and stuff. It's got quite busy now. So, but before it would be like just straight out, 3 hours. I'd write to 12, or I'd write to 1. And that'd be it. I'd knock off for the day, and I do 3 hours a day every day. And if I've got time to do a little bit more and I feel like it, I'll do a little bit more. But I generally don't work in the afternoons at all, or the evening.
The dead time, or it's admin.
Yeah, exactly. So exactly, that's what I do.
Keeping lots of open projects, or are you somebody? I know a screenwriter. She's just a one story kind of person, or have you got lots of open boxes?
Yeah, I got loads of boxes open at the minute, but I've always worked that way. So I used to always have like a book, collection of short stories growing, theatre, and a film. And that's what I used to do.
Across forms, rather.
Yeah, always done that. So I've just got used to working across forms in that way. And now, like I say, it's got a little bit more difficult because I've got a lot less time. But I'm working on a number of projects at the minute. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll come to that towards the end. If we could now watch the trailer for Lovers Rock, just in case nobody has had a chance to watch it. It's on BBC iPlayer, obviously Steve McQueen's series of films that were put out on, I think it was on a Sunday, wasn't it?
It was on Sunday, yeah.
About Black British culture. And then you can tell us a little bit about your journey onto that project and the episodes that you did. But I'm absolutely, I've said this to you already, a huge fangirl of Lovers Rock. To me, it is cinematic. It's the best television and the best thing I've seen all year. I hope there's a chance to watch it on a big screen, because for me, it is visual poetry. And also I'm desperate to see, obviously, what it is on the page, because as those of you who've seen it, there is very minimal dialogue in this, but certainly you could not achieve this story without a gold standard script, and that I know from working as a filmmaker. So over to you, Pete, who I think is now going to queue up the trailer to show. I don't know if we need to. Not sure sound. Okay, I'm not sure if the sound came through, because we definitely didn't hear it. But if you have a chance, definitely check out the trailer. But best top recommendation I can give you, I've watched all the films this year that were released for various juries, and this was by far the top of my pile. And it's still available on iPlayer. So tell us a little bit about, how did you come to get involved with this project? How did Steve find you?
Yeah, so I was just wandering around, I wasn't wandering. I was in Sheffield actually doing a theatre writers program, and I got a phone call I got a phone call from Helen Bart, who's like doing the research on these projects, on the Steve McQueen project, as it was called then. And Helen said, would you like to come in and talk about it? Helen knew me for some theatre work I'd done before, some previous work. And yeah, I just came in and talked to them about it. I'd known this project was happening for about 2 years before that. And I'd been like, I really want to do this. This is like the pinnacle of what I've wanted to do in my writing since I started, since I was a little kid. And I talk about Black British culture. And it's Steve McQueen, who I wanted to work with from like Western Deep. I saw Western Deep in like, maybe 2000 or something. A friend took me to see it and I was just like blown away. And I said I wanted to work with him at that point. So yeah, it was really amazing to get that call. I thought I'd never get that call, to be honest. I had no screenwriting credits at that time. So I was like, it's not going to happen. Just get used to it, Courttia. Suck it up. Yeah, it's gone. And then they said, come in. And I met them, showed them my screenplays. They loved them, and they said, it's really good. You're a novelist and a screenwriter. That's really rare. And I was like, wow, that's the first time anyone's ever said that to me. Usually people had said before that, you need to brush up on your screenwriting. Yes, your screenwriting is not really up to par. And
pick your. Everyone wants you to pick one or the other.
Pick one, yeah. Stick to one thing, yeah.
Don't be hyphenated. They don't like hyphenated.
They didn't like it at all. It's particularly some directors that I was trying to work with. They're like, "Why are you doing this? And why are you doing this?" But I listened, and I kind of changed the screenplays that I'd worked on at that time, and that was the one I submitted to them. And then it was over to meeting Steve. They said, "Oh, Steve's got to decide." So you got to meet him, and if you guys get on, I was just really scared. Yeah.
Did you meet in London? Did you go to Amsterdam?
No, we met at Soho Hotel, and 2 days after my daughter was born. So stakes were high. My wife was on maternity leave, so like she's like, you need to get a job now because I'm not going to be working for a while. And then I had this meeting with Steve, so it was really it was like a screenplay. And first thing Steve asked me was, so you say you're from West London, what bus do you take from White City to Ladbroke Grove? That's the first thing he asked me. I was like, okay, this could be cool. I got this, man. Of course I know that. So I told him and said, okay. And then we started chatting. Yeah.
So he wanted the real thing. He was going for like, let me find the authentic voices, people who've lived this experience.
Yeah, I think with me, because that was my SP, that was my USP. So what I mean, like, was that and he said to me, "What can you bring to this?" And I was like, "I'm from West London. I'm pretty sure I'll be like the only Black screenwriters you get from West London who could tell this story." And I don't know if that was strictly true, but that's what I was saying.
Yeah.
So he was like, okay, again, okay.
Sorry. Just a little intranet thing.
Go ahead.
But was it already an outline of the idea or the concept? Or how did the idea for Lovers Rock, emerge? At what stage were you brought into it?
Yeah, that was Steve's idea. But then, there'd been like different ideas floating around about what this series was going to be like, and like things like it's the story of one family and cross-generational, but by that time, Steve said, "Just listen, we're not doing that. Actually, it's going to be something else, and it was an anthology." He knew that it was an anthology, and at that point in time, before, because we did a writer's room 6 weeks or so, and before that time, all we knew was Mangrove. He was interested in doing Mangrove, and we were talking about Mangrove. But when we got in the room, he said, he'd said some things about, he done some interviews where he talked about Lovers Rock, but I didn't know for sure we were going to do it. And then once we were in the room, he said, I want to do Mangrove. I'm thinking about doing Lovers Rock or Saturday Night, as it was called then. We're going to do Leroy Logan, as it was called then, and he came in to talk to us for about 2 hours, so that was like really mind-blowing. And we had a couple of others that we were going to do, which actually we didn't end up doing, and they got swapped for Alex Wheatle and Education. Yeah.
Brilliant. And was the process for you about really an outline, a synopsis, a beat sheet? Did you go to first draft form first? How did you work on this, especially considering like the form of Lovers Rock is in itself very minimalist and cinematic? So was there a version where there was going to be a lot of dialogue and a story? Did that start that way? How did it end up where it became?
Yeah, we broke the story in the room, and we beat it out in the room, and then our treatments were written by the lead writer, and then we came back, and then I did Red, White, and Blue first.
Okay.
And then after I'd done Red, White, and Blue, I'd done like a few drafts on that. Steve was like, he said, "Listen, congratulations on Red, White, and Blue. You did really well." And then we're gonna, because he'd been shooting Widows at the time, so he wasn't like around for the first iteration of those. But then when he came back, he was like, "Okay, I'm on it now," and he became, he did his writing thing on it as well. And then and we talked about that, what we were going to do together, working as a writing team. And then he said, "Yes, can you do Lovers Rock?" Which I was like, "Yes, brilliant." That's like I said, the one I really wanted to do from the beginning. And so I always wanted, and I had an idea of a way that it could be done, like in the treatment, but I always wanted to do something like I always wanted to make an art house film about Black British culture with Steve McQueen. That's what I wanted to do. That was my dream thing. That's what, I would
that
say
is
that
a fine
regularly.
Dream. That is a very good dream to have. And now you've lived it.
Well, this is the thing, but like when after I'd done Red, White, and Blue, I was like, that was more procedural, that was more by the book and everything. I was like, I'm hoping that I'm going to have a go at doing something like that. I'm going to have a go at living my dream now with Steve right there, and hoping, because we'd had a chat about his stuff, and hoping that he liked it based on what he said that he wanted. I went away, I did that, gave it to Steve. Steve was like, "Yes, this is great." And then we were back and forth from then, just writing. And we just like connected, man. Like we wanted to see the same thing, thank God. You know what I mean? And so, and it was never really, because I know that we were told before that Steve doesn't like a lot of dialogue. So Red, White, and Blue, I kind of like slightly got away with it. But even though he cut a lot of stuff out, like there was more dialogue than was in it. But I knew this time I was like, I'm going to try and I'm going to try and get him on board with Steve's vibe and make it as minimal as possible, because I'm a very dialogue-driven screenwriter. So I was like, oh, I'm going to try and do something else completely opposite and make it like next to, not next to none, but really, really less. So, and then he cut out loads. Even when I'd done that, he was still like, no, let's have less. But I was like, please cut out anything that you don't think is like working and stuff. Or not even that it wasn't working, just that, if we don't need it, And Steve put in all sorts of things, and with Red, White, and Blue, all sorts of things that I couldn't, I won't say what, because it's like, I don't like doing that, but all sorts of things that I hadn't envisaged or whatever. And then we own the script together,
No, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Now I wanted to ask you, I mean, we're rapidly getting to, this is not our part one. I mean, surely we've got to come back next week for our second chat, but like, if you were like advising screenwriters, one of the things we talked about earlier was that you wouldn't have been able to write Lovers Rock and perhaps Red, White, and Blue as a 20-something-year-old writer. But what advice would you give a young writer today about their writing career and how they maybe how they can anticipate the stories that they tell, or how they engage with the industry? I mean, take it whichever way you want.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I always say to people, just write. Just make sure you're doing the work, doing the writing. Like, you can't get worse by writing. You will get better over time. You just will naturally. Also, take time. You will grow as a human being. You will grow as an individual. Experience, just age, just does something that you can't even. You don't have to force that kind of thing. It just will happen. And I'm not saying that you can't be good. Like Paul also said, you can't be a good writer before you're 30. And I was like, no, like because you haven't lived yet, he said. And I was like, Paul, also, I've lived more than you when I was 19. You know what I mean? But like, but having said that, now I'm.
Say anything.
But now looking back, I'm like, but there's that thing that time does, and having spent like, you know, extra days on this planet, years on this planet, you know, you can't mess with that. It just does something to you. You just grow, you know, inevitably. And if you're
It's
practicing,
like you see the horizon, isn't it? I feel it's like something like you emerge out of like everything when you're in your 20s and even 30s to an extent. You're just like, whoa, everything's so
yeah,
close.
what's going on? Yeah,
And then,
who am I?
not to say we're in our 40s or anything, but then suddenly
No,
kind
no.
of, kind
How
of
dare you?
understand something about.
But yeah, I think you do. You have a bit more understanding, and I know myself a lot better now. You would, right? How do you really know yourself in your like? I remember thinking in my late 20s, even though I was a published author, who the hell am I? Where am I going? What's happening? You know what I mean? And whereas now I'm like, okay, I have an understanding of who I am and what I want to do in myself. So my advice would be to take your time. Don't rush. That's not to say don't put out work in your 20s. I wholly encourage putting out work in your 20s because I think then you get used to the practice of putting things out. But don't worry if things don't come the way that you want them to. Allow yourself the time to grow. You know, don't be like, as we say in the Caribbean, hurry, come up. You know, like, you know what I mean, like where you're just rushing and losing sight of the present moment. And also,
It's like the things that hurt us are our expectations anyway. And I think that
totally,
thinking you're going to be like at the top of your game in your 20s
yeah,
seems like one of those things that really wounds people. And I think
you
you
are.
took the long game.
No, I didn't. I wanted that in my 20s. I mean, I definitely, yeah, I totally wanted to be at top of my game in my 20s. But now I realized like what a folly that was. And I think also just like, but one thing I did have was that I was taught by really good writing mentors, and they always said just like make it all about the work, but also enjoy the work, enjoy the present moment, enjoy the act of creation right now, because you can't go back and do those things again, you know. And like I think I enjoyed doing the work in my 20s, you know, and you won't be able to have that energy and that vibe. What you created then, even, you won't be able to create now, you know. So those are important things. And I think it's really important that Steve said that as well. He said he couldn't have made Small Axe when he made Hunger. You know what I mean? He said I wasn't ready, you know. And so this is just something that's natural for all of us.
Yeah, and enjoy the journey, like you
Enjoy
said.
the journey for sure. Yeah, because you're getting to that place. You
Yeah,
will get there.
definitely. Yeah, and then when you get the success, and you're like, well, now what? And now what I want to ask you, my last question, because we're heading towards that time, is what are you working on now? What's your landscape look like in terms of, and what's the reception to Small Axe been like for you personally in terms of your, you know, your reach with people answering your calls, people you might want to work with that, you know, you can ring, and you know, what are your ambitions now? Like, because that's the thing, is you've achieved that art house film about Black British culture with Steve McQueen. Oof, where do you go from there?
I think you know, just to answer that, the tail end of what you were saying there before you got to the question, which is like don't always have other aspirations. That's another thing my mentor told me. He said don't just aim to be published, or don't just aim to be successful, because what happens when you get there, you'll have finished your journey. You've got to have something else bigger than that. And I always thought to myself, okay, so once I've done the art house film with Steve McQueen, what else? What am I going to do after? That's the interesting thing. That's the exciting thing. And not to say that this isn't interesting for me, and that was the goal, but then there's got to be another goal after that, you know. And I am working on my own original screenplay. I'm developing that with Film 4 at the minute. I'm super excited about that, because that's just another foray into Black British culture, but from a completely different perspective that's never been seen before as well. Black British working class culture, I should say. And also a TV pilot, it's the same thing. Again, another slice of Black British working class life, but completely different lens. I am. There's one thing I can't really talk about, but it's kind of like a period drama, but it's not set in the UK.
Is it a musical?
It's not a musical.
Okay.
Not a musical at all. Very,
Well, I
very
was just
much not
wondering where
there.
your music and your screenwriting was going to come together. So
I'm trying to work it out. I'm trying to work that out. I had a meeting today that's talking about that kind of thing, and like they were talking about lovers rock and saying, you know, would you be interested in doing more music stuff? And I am, but just like I'm not interested in the traditional, obviously, musical. You know, I'm interested in ways that we can like disrupt and subvert the idea of what a musical is, and the use of music. So I'm doing that. I'm trying to get on a sci-fi project. I'm trying to do my own sci-fi project as a feature film. Yeah, work. I'm open. And you know, to working on other projects. Like the period drama is not my own project. It's a project that was brought to me, and I was like, okay, yeah, I love that. I'm interested in stories. What did you say? Oh yeah, in terms of like how things have changed for me. Um, yeah, obviously, I mean, like I'm getting the meetings that I probably couldn't have got before I met Steve, and Steve's very happy about that. Steve was very, I hope he doesn't mind me saying, Steve was very frustrated about what had happened to me before, and he talks about the lost generation, but yeah, he'd been like, really upset that he wasn't happy that he is happy that it took him for this to happen, but at the same time he's unhappy about that too, and he's been very clear about that. And yeah, but it has changed. It's changed everything. I can talk to people now, and I'm sharing my ideas.
Because it's like this idea of bringing people along with you, isn't it?
Yeah,
The
exactly.
meteorite, and you're a meteorite now too. And there's in one sense creating that trail of other people who will follow in those footsteps.
Yeah, it's really exciting to know I was a part of that, and that Steve has done that, and I really wholeheartedly appreciate that he gave me that opportunity. And he saw something in me that even though I was making a lot of noise about, I'm good enough, I'm good enough, I'm good enough. But when I walked into that writer's room, I was shook. I was shook, and I was shook for a good few days. And the other writers in the room saw that I was nervous and shook, and they actually embraced me. And there was no, they were just like, we're going to look after you, we'll take care of you, or whatever. And until I found my feet, because I realized I'd never been tested before, and I got very, very nervous in the room, And Steve, like literally all the time, would be saying to me, "You're brilliant. You're really good. You're da 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 da," and making me feel confident
I'm so
again.
glad.
Yeah. Totally.
And like right now, I'm just really excited to see what you do with all this, because I think that you've in one sense, you've kind of reached that place where the work that you do now, no doubt, is going to be career defining in the next phase of your life, because we're so young.
Yeah,
We've only just begun, really.
We're
only just, like grown up people, adults. So finally, the work that comes will be, that kind of period of your life where you can really tell the stories that Courttia Newland can only tell.
Yeah, but at the same time, it's again, I try not to put that at the forefront of my mind. What I'm trying to do is just to have fun with it, and to be like, okay, what do I care about passionately? What do I feel really, really strongly about? And what do I feel like I would enjoy doing? And I want to be working with people that I enjoy having conversations with and whatever. And I just don't want it to feel too much like work. If it feels too much like work, I don't really want to do it. And I had so much fun writing Red, White, and Blue and Lovers Rock. Like really,
That's
really
so
enjoyed
great.
it.
I think it shows. It shows in that piece is just the joy of storytelling. The episode. So thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the time, because you are clearly very, very busy, and it's great that you can share your experience with us. I think it's going to be hugely inspiring for all the people who are watching this evening. So thank you, and I hope to see you down in London for a kind of a whiskey and some stories about behind the scenes as well. So
that'd be very cool. I'll be up for that.
Thank you to everyone at NCLA who helped arrange this event, Pete and Melanie, who did all the technical coordination. I believe the link to the trailer is in the YouTube chat. And then the last thing they've asked me is for you to check out the website for the Newcastle University and the Newcastle Centre for Literary Arts for the last few remaining events that are in the series. So check out the website and sign up for those events like this one. So it leaves for me to say good night to everyone, and to Courttia for all your brilliance. We look forward to seeing more of your work. Thank you so much.
Good night, everyone.
Take care. Bye.